What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Ben Dankiw of NAV43.com. Ben, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. And since this is part of the Top Agency series, I did one with Adi Clevitt. And Ben, she's got an interesting niche. She is a done-for-you easy button for someone to create SOPs. So she goes into a company and helps them create their SOPs. It could be for client onboarding, could be for staff onboarding, could be for just to smooth out any process in the business. So that was an interesting one. We geeked out on our favorite productivity tools and the non-sexy stuff that makes businesses run properly, right? That was a really good one. Also, Kevin Hergen was an interesting one. He's had an agency since 1995. So he talked about just the evolution of the agency space, his company, the ups and downs. And as you know, there's just been changes in the past year, let alone the past, decades, right? So he's navigated those. So that was an interesting one as well. So check that out. And this episode's brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships. And how do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. Ben, we call ourselves the magic elves that run around in the background and make it look easy for the host so they can create great content, great relationships, and most importantly, run their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. I have lots of episodes actually on Inspired Insider that is free content. You can actually check them out. So I'm excited to introduce Ben Dankiw. He's founder of NAV43.com. He built his agency with hands-on experience growing brands. And over the past 12 years, he's worked with over hundreds actually of brands. He's worked with clients like Canadian Tire, Porsche, Ceridian, TouchBistro, and many, many more. And all of it is that's helped him strengthen his approach to full funnel digital marketing. And Ben, thanks for joining me.
I'm happy to be here, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on.
Just tell us a little bit more about NAV43 and what you do. And if you're listening to the audio, there's a video and you'll see us poking around Ben's site.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I founded NAV43 in 2016 with a few partners. I have been the CEO for many years. Over the past year, I've actually been kind of transitioning a role, being more in a customer success kind of hands-on role. But as the founder, I started this company from a vision of what we'd previously been doing over the past few years, where I'd learned many skills, just actually from the paid media side, from the SEO execution side, working across many agencies in the past. We are a niche agency that focuses specifically on performance marketing through paid media, Google Ads, Meta Ads, that kind of stuff, full funnel advertising programs, and SEO, the organic side of things. So growing brands through search rankings across multiple search engines, namely, and the main priority being Google, of course, being one that I'm very familiar with. So we've built brands on kind of both these demand gen performance side, as well as that kind of like brand building search ranking side. So I have experience across both. I started my career on the paid media side and kind of gained a love for the SEO side. I would say that kind of started fostering in 2015 on the SEO side of things, where I started getting into it. So, hearing about some of the previous agencies that you had on here, especially the OGs who've been here since the 90s, like seeing that like evolution of the landscape, I know how much I've seen change. It's when I first started digital marketing in 2011 versus when I started, taking an adventure into SEO in 2015, 16 to today, where things are changing. So I'm a little bit humble in the fact that I'm still learning as we go, but happy to have the agency that I've built around us.
What caused you, Ben, to start your own agency? Because you have a long storied career with other agencies and a lot of experience there.
Yeah, I mean, that all comes back to, I think it was about 2012. I kind of forced my way into the agency space. I was living out in Waterloo and I just learned how to use Google Ads. And I paid for myself to come to this seminar where I was learning all about how to, expand my lead generation experience at the time.
What
And
was the seminar? Do you remember?
it was actually one run by DAC Group, which was the agency that hired me from that seminar. They basically offered me an interview and hired me the next week. And the seminar was just on how to do localized lead generation. And at the time, I was working for a scientific company where I was trying to learn different skill sets, like how to do local marketing versus international marketing, because I was doing both. At that agency, I did really well in the first year. I'm a big fan of career evolution, going through periods of like depth versus breadth. And this was a period in my life where I was really focused on depth, learning my skill set. I worked there for 2 years and I really learned. At the time, I thought I learned way more, but I learned one skill, which was how to be a specialist in these platforms. And when I was at that agency, I was told my path to become, an account director, eventually lead the agency in a 5, 10, 15-year plan. And I was like, well, I know businesses that could use my services today. And I started my first agency slash freelancing, and it kind of took off from there.
How did you, when you first started, decide on pricing?
That's a great question. When I first started, we focused on small businesses when I first started because, while I had experience with large enterprises from my agency, like the agency I was working at the time, my network and where I could find business was in restaurants, real estate, single service shops. And I basically built a model kind of thinking, okay, what are these companies? I kind of surveyed some companies. What are they willing to pay? And it kind of came into that, like between $500 and $1,500 a month was a sweet spot for marketing. So I built my price range around like where I knew they could afford and where I could kind of fit in as a specialist and prove my value. Knowing that at the time that if I got 10 of these, there's 10 clients, $10,000 a month. That's much more at the time that I was making and this is 2013. So much more than I was making in any agency.
Talk about niche for a second. You said you started off restaurants, real estate. How did the niche change over time from who you were serving?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting story. We ended up getting a lot of restaurants and we niched into the first agency we created, myself and my partner at the time, Tyler. We built a restaurant niche agency where it was like, you know what? Google My Business or Google actually at the time it was Google My Business was really easy to win for anyone who was in SEO. Local lead generation was like a cheat hack. And PPC or Google Ads still in 2014, 2015 was just such a lucrative space for specific companies because your experts in those categories weren't focusing on a steakhouse in Toronto. And your steakhouses in Toronto didn't have the specialty and the experience that we had. So I think we were up to like 20 to 25 restaurants. And we niched into that. Now, we changed that tune when we realized how thin restaurant margins were, the lack of ability to scale. And for us to be too niche like that, we eventually kind of got bored of restaurants at the end of the day.
Good thing you did that before COVID hit.
Yeah, right, exactly. So we stopped marketing specifically towards restaurants. We decided at the time, we're like, you know what, let's niche into our services. Instead of being the dentist SEO place or the restaurant SEO spot or insert service, we decided to say, like, you know what, let's be the best at SEO. Let's be the best at Google Ads. And those two small services, we can build an agency on. And we did. We went to conferences, we did online, we were very it was a lot of self-taught stuff at the time. Like you had Moz and you had, Search Engine Journal and all these different sources for teaching. But at the end of the day, like you learn through experience. And we gained clients and had big wins early on because we were passionate about our service and really niched into that specialty was what we decided to do.
So now, what does a good client look like for you? Because then it's really interesting. You thought about it. So restaurants, but then you realize they're not scalable. Also, there's thin margins. So how do they don't have as much money as another company may to reinvest into their marketing?
That's another great question. So we've went through some phases, and I'd say we learned on the go. We had 40 to 50,000 a month retainer clients. I've had several of those over the last few years, and I've had the restaurants as the other end of the spectrum. And really kind of where it ended up is we're too small, and I don't have the desire to run necessarily a 100-person agency, right now. I think it's something that might grow as we grow. But to build an accounts team to really go after enterprise as our main focus, like when we had our Ceridians, when we had our TouchBistros who were spending millions of dollars a year with us, that's a certain model, and it doesn't necessarily foster the passion and the drive of experience. So we decided to kind of focus in on what we call scale up brands. So you're a brand that's between, let's say, 5 to 10 million, and you're spending anywhere from 10 to 20,000 a month on your marketing. And you need someone who can drive strategy, who can guide you and actually knows the platforms in and out. At that size and that stage, there are certain frameworks that will help you grow, but there's not an exact playbook for every niche because we're not a dentist versus et cetera. Like we will take an e-commerce brand versus a B2B lead gen. So we don't necessarily rule out the type of business. We have e-commerce clients and we have lead gen clients, but they typically have to have digitally savvy and the desire to win online, because nowadays with how complicated both Google from an SEO perspective is and the rising costs of ad platforms, we don't have the same leeway we had to just like spend money and figure it out when in the early days. Now you have to come at this pretty strategically, and it's not like your ad team is going to have all the answers. What is your positioning? Do you have a product fit? Is your marketing, are you competitive against your against your competitors? Where do you kind of position? So we look for brands that are looking to take it to the next level and have the initial product fit.
I want to talk about the change of landscape because you mentioned, obviously we talk about Kevin being since 1995, and even in the past year, there's been a lot of changes. Talk about some of the changes that you are seeing and you're innovating and evolving because of those changes.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say there's two different ones I would really zone in on as big changes over the last year. I'll start with paid media and Google ads and meta ads. Anyone who's running an ad campaign would know about the changes in the importance of first-party data. People have probably talked about cookieless futures, and you've seen first party like GDPR, different, California has their own data concerns. They just launched a few new other ones. Every state is launching their own data management system. And then just the changes inside the platforms from, lawsuits Google's having and whatnot, right? There's a lot of changes in data and the importance of it. And nowadays, over the last few years, Google has experimented, and I've gone into this in some of my own content, but experimented through something called Performance Max, which is all about machine learning and automation on your ad programs. Facebook has their own type of product like this. So these ad platforms are leaning into automation. They're leaning into machine learning, and they're leaning into removing your controls as advertisers. So the only real areas that you have is understanding how to target and strategize and build a plan of who to go after and the data that you have. So some of our most successful things in that area have really been around building full funnel valuation programs. Like what's a qualified lead worth versus just a standard lead versus a sales qualified lead. And those milestones can map over to an ad platform as an example. So not to get too far in the weeds there, but being able to properly map the value of your customer, and that's more on the lead gen side, versus e-commerce, where you might say, how can I expand the value of my cart, or how can I upsell a secondary product to a client? If your ad costs are rising and your data availability from the platforms and your ability to change your targeting is decreasing, the only way you can really lean into that increase in return is by getting smarter with how you're leveraging your valuation, going after the right customers, right? So that change over the last year has been quite significant, and it's led us to have to learn more about CRMs, us to learn more about our Google Tag Manager implementations, our GA4, of course, migrated. So learning more about the data and then learning how to leverage it in ads. That's been a massive change on the ad ecosystem. On the SEO side of things, I mean, if you haven't heard about ChatGPT and AI content, you're not living on this planet if you're a marketer. So that has been a wild change in the space. But more importantly to that, for anyone who is making a business out of it, is the repercussions of it. So content agencies have been struggling. I know several content agency owners, and not to say they're all going to business. They have struggling in the sense of we need to pivot and figure out how we're going to fit into this market. But that lower market, like cheap content space, that's being wiped out pretty much. But on top of that, it's like, okay, so now brands have way more accessibility to create content. So how do you stand out? And Google is really closely monitoring this by looking at, you need to have helpful content. You need to have, you need to make sure that you're trustworthy. How do we know you didn't just spit this out from ChatGPT? All that stuff that we used to have this playbook for how we would build amazing topical clusters and content calendars for SEO focus, but we still do. But now it's much easier to build that. So that's not the value anymore. It's more about how that fits into your client's resources, the product, and et cetera, and how you can stand out. So it's been a lot of changes around AI content and the change in how Google is reacting to AI content.
So what are some things you've had to shift? You mentioned before we hit record, the helpful content update. And
Yes,
that's actually an official from Google, right?
Yeah, this is official. So it's been a wild ride. So anyone who's in the content space, I'm part of a community called Rhodium, where it's online business owners who are typically growing some sort of online site, content business, e-commerce business. It's a great group. Gives me access to a lot of really smart content marketers, and I have a strong community in the content space. And there has just been shifts. So not only from an agency perspective, but I have NAV43, but we also launch our own brands as well. So I have a brand that focuses on morning motivation. I have a brand that does finances, investment decisions. And I know lots of different content creators in the gaming world and all these different types of niches. The whole content landscape has changed. Google has put out, I think they put out 6 algorithm updates. And an algorithm update, for anyone who's not really an SEO person or really aware, is when Google rewrites some of the rules. And it's not like when Google Meta Ads or Google Ads comes out with an update. They have to tell you because you're spending money on their platform, you're their customer, they're going to guide you a certain way. When Google as an organic platform puts out an algorithm update, they're typically trying to fight against something being taken advantage of. Now that leads a lot of gray in the area of what's right, what's wrong, and what really is the best result. So to kind of make a longer story a little bit shorter, over the past year and a half, ever since September 2022, when they launched their first helpful content update, there's been major shifts every quarter in Google. And where the Google results page is now, where there's billions of searches every single day, there's a lot of bad content being ranked. There's a lot of, I don't know if anyone's seen how much Reddit has blown up in the past few months. And there's a lot of opportunity for what used to be called black hat, like spam SEO, where you could just create poor content on Reddit or Medium or whatnot and blast a bunch of links on it and get that content to the first page of Google. So they're experimenting because they're trying to fight this wave of AI, and they made some really radical changes. And my opinion and the opinion of many other industry experts is that they're going to shift back this year. So anyone who's in the content space, we're watching some of these results seesaw a little bit and trying to keep our clients' interests in mind, not hit the panic button on some of them. I haven't had any clients like get penalized or crushed. But at the same time, they're like, where is this going to land? Especially with the changes in, I guess, not to go too far into it, but search generative experience is like Google's version of AI content on their Google search results. So they're also experimenting with this, which is a whole new thing. So all these innovations, all these changes are ways that Google is like, we're trying to make good content stand out, and to be determined if they succeed in that.
Ben, thanks for sharing that. And in general, I have these conversations that you do too, with clients or potential clients. And everything Ben just said, it's like, that's one of the reasons you hire an agency. Yeah. They actually keep track of this stuff and actually stay on top of this stuff. And because there's this constant conversation of, well, should I just do this in-house or should I hire an agency to do this? And whatever Ben just said, if it doesn't convince you, you should probably hire someone who's an expert at this stuff. I don't know what will. Talk about morning motivation for a second and that brand, and what are you doing with it?
Oh yeah, so that's an interesting one. So we built, it's called Own Mornings. It's still a pretty small brand at this point. I'm kind of wondering where to go with it. How much time I want to invest in building this, because investing in content niches right now is a little bit of a tricky one. So I launched the brand prior to ChatGPT. But the whole concept of this is sharing stories, and that everyone, there's lots of advice on the internet. You can follow Andrew Huberman to find out his morning routine, and you can hear you can go on YouTube and you can find out all these different types of perfect your morning. But this is really built on the idea of like, you can own your own morning and whatever works for you and your flexibility. And here are some tools that you can use to help build the morning that works for you. So it's a resource hub. And it's going to evolve. And my kind of vision for this brand as we grow is going to be actually getting stories from certain kinds of individuals. So for example, if you're a doctor and you're living as a resident, or an aspiring doctor, I should say, and you're living as a resident in healthcare, your morning routine is not going to be the same as a digital marketer working 9 to 5. It's just not. And to say that you can have the perfect morning might be tricky. But if you hear how other physicians who've been in the space were, spending their mornings, I really believe in the power of community. I think that's something that's going to stand above. I mean, not just with social media, but building brands and building community, I think, is where we have to move forward to as marketers. So my vision for Own Mornings is building a resource and tools hub, and then growing it through a community of like-minded people who want to also share their stories, build people up in their mornings.
So there's a community aspect to it. I like it. It's a niche version of Own Your Morning. So, because someone who's single, it's like a joke, because like my business partner, has, 4 kids, right under 12. So someone who's single, waking up on the beach and doing like a 3-hour morning routine, it's going to be different from him when they're trying to pack lunches, get kids off to school. So maybe there's like 100%. A niche Own Your Morning if you have 7 kids and you have 2 businesses and you have to wake up, as opposed to you're single, you're a digital nomad, and you can, meditate for 3 hours on the beach if you want, right?
Maybe it's just find time to eat a protein bar.
Exactly.
Just hang on.
What has been a helpful tool that you have found through that brand and through the content, just for anyone, or like something that you have found that is people should think about implementing in the morning? I mean, I'm always thinking about this too, because I'm more of a night person. And so I went through a span last year. I was like, okay, I'm going to just try this morning. I'm going to try and wake up at like 5:30 and see what happens. What have you found are some, maybe 1 or 2 tools that people can think about with their morning?
It's a little bit of a mental tool, and I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head right now, but acceptance and being open to change. Don't feel like, this is more advice, and I'll have some tools, but no one's morning, unless you are a billionaire entrepreneur who has already set his life. Like, don't think you're going to compare with Jeff Bezos's morning routine. So go into it with realistic, being like the realistic aspect that it might change. Your mornings are not going to be the same throughout the entire year. Different parts of your career, different parts of your life, things are going to change. But the way I kind of like to approach it is just being mindful. Like if you're continuously being mindful of your morning and understanding what's working, what's not working, and trying to, it's not always actually trying to improve it, because sometimes the people think that anytime it's performance, it's like this. And it's often like this, and then it comes back here, and then you're like, wow, I slept into this time where I went out 4 times this week because I had I'm at a conference and I did this, and my morning routine is shot. And it's just like fitness. It's like any of these different areas where you're gonna have those peaks and valleys. And I just find it's important to be realistic, not be overly critical on yourself, and try to find just that balance of where you can get back to it. And anyone who consistently does this over a longer period of time will always just improve naturally. So I tell people not to be overly critical and be mindful of what's working for them. And in terms of tool, there's lots. I love, I'm a big fan of, an app called Calm, and no affiliation here. So I love like meditation, mindfulness moments, but also a fan of simple journals. And you don't need to have the performance productivity 3.0 journal that has everything built in for here's your first 3 priority items for the day. Those are great, and those work wonderful for some people. But simply writing down some of your thoughts and tracking your sleep and like taking steps to be to help you be mindful in a written format. And if you'd like to journal on an app, journal on an app. But that's either like do it online or do it in a journal book. I just think that simple tool helps a lot of people.
What do you have a regular time that you wake up?
So I fluctuate up here in Canada. It's dark a lot. So in the wintertime, I'm usually up at 7 a.m. I went through a surgery recently, and I'm at a point where for my shoulder, where I had to, it's a pretty invasive surgery to change it was not to get detailed, but dislocated a lot.
Well, yeah.
Anyways,
people who have that happen, it just becomes a chronic dislocation. My brother had that too. So yeah,
exactly. So this has been,
you can like reach for something. I mean, some people like reach for something and like dislocates. It's just terribly painful, and then the ligaments loosen, etc. Yeah.
So I got that fixed. So for example, right now, my body is in a state of healing. I don't judge myself if I sleep until 7:30, because sleep is good for health. You should judge yourself, but no, I'm just but like right now, I'm waking up anywhere from 7 to 7:30 because it's dark out and I'm bored. My typical routine is wake up around 6:15. I like to work out in the morning. I like to have at least 30 minutes to 45 minutes to take some sort of personal content, whether it's hockey, podcasting, or just literally watching some sports highlights. But either way, I usually have that kind of period of time for myself to enjoy something. And then I like to get my day started. But right now, like I said, it's about those valleys, and I'm in a state of heal. So I'm like, don't be overly critical and change it up.
What's the website so people could check it out?
That's ownmornings.com.
Ownmornings.com. Yeah. Yeah. I'm fascinated by this. I'll have to check it out, and I encourage other people to check it out. Ownmornings.com. I was talking to one agency owner, and he wakes up at 3:30. He goes to bed early, but we talk about mornings. It was fascinating just to hear how his routine is, right? He's like, 3:30. To me, I'm like, wow, that's the middle of the night, and I'm sometimes going to bed at like midnight or 1 or 2. So I'd have to change things around drastically. But to hear what he gets done between 3:30 and 8 already is phenomenal. So everyone has a different routine. So I'll check it out. I encourage everyone to check it out. Talk about, Ben, a little bit about, you mentioned you're going to jump back in to more of customer success. Talk about that decision, and what does that look like for you?
So we're still a small team at NAV43. There's 10 of us full time. I think we were talking a little bit before about, we went to the drawing board last year and realized that where we need to stand out as an agency in performance this year is being digital navigators, because there's so much change. We're going to be positioning our agency as that, not just launching keywords and putting out blog posts and all these things that are important for an SEO strategy tactfully, but to be the ones to navigate a brand through all these changes. And with that decision, it makes a lot of sense for me, having the most experience in the agency, to be involved from a strategic level. We are still in an area, and just like you started in the beginning of the podcast about SOP building, and we had all our SOPs built out. We had a beautiful process. We had all these different proven things that are working, and then all these changes happen. It's okay. We got to readdress this process. We got to readdress this process. We got to, hire for these new roles that are now much more important than they used to be 5 years ago. So in this state of change, I find I've always been a lead by example kind of person, and we don't have a huge accounts team. We invest pretty strongly into our strategists. They work directly with their brands, and they take accountability for the growth of their brands. So people who are really strong in one area of SEO and understand content marketing and that, they might not have as much experience in developing a relationship from an accounts perspective and understanding the overall business. So as a entrepreneur, business owner, I have a little bit more insight into how some of these other owners think. I have a little more insight into how stakeholders might evaluate marketing programs. And I try to impart some of that insight with my team, who are very bright and really good at what they do. So building that kind of relationship where they can lean into me for advice on how to approach business decisions that a brand is making, not just marketing decisions, because they typically know a lot more than me about SEO these days, let me tell you.
So the rebrand that you're thinking about and going to do, whenever someone is actually listening to this, it may already be out, but is around the digital navigators.
That's exactly it. My business partner, Peter, who's been with me since we've been partners since 2012. We're the two owners of NAV43. He comes from a brand background, and this is a little bit of his brainchild. I mean, it's a joint decision. We've been working on this together for over the last year, but he's the one bringing this to life, which I'm super excited about. And it is all about positioning that navigation. So it's not only going to look way better, which is awesome, because we don't love our current site. It was kind of a little bit of a, anyways, but it's going to look way better.
I feel like many people say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like, especially when you're looking at it all the time, you find like a little detail and you're just, but
how will that manifest on the site, with the new brand, digital navigators? Well, I mean, maybe you don't know fully yet, but what would that look like?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I am not fully, I don't know yet exactly. I actually get a nice presentation next week from him, where he's going to take me through the full vision of it. But the way we've kind of positioned it is actually very navigational. Like, you're at the helm, and there's going to be kind of travel, but I think more aquatic ships related. So the visuals would be kind of like steering and exploring adventurous new areas. But where it's going to be a lot more helpful is we got away from being too technical. Our current site really breaks down, like, it's like we're talking to another SEO. Whereas we've realized our main target market is people who are experienced digital marketers, who have a really strong grasp on growing a brand, but need someone to be technical for them. And they don't need to know all the details.
Talk about Quark for a second, and what you did with them.
Yes, Quark. They're a very fun brand we worked with for several years. I believe we worked with them for 4 years. And through that time, we've really evolved our entire program with them. Spending, when we first started working with them, I think not to go on, I know I don't want to share specific numbers at the moment because off the top of my head, but we at least 5x to their spend and improved their return on investment even higher than that. They are a brand that focuses on polar expeditions. So they have these giant trips where they be bringing people to the Arctic, to the Antarctic, to Greenland, and these are $20,000 to $30,000 trips that people are investing in per person. And you can imagine having a travel ban through COVID. So we were with them before COVID happened. We had to pivot, and honestly, they kind of thrived at the end of the day. Of course, COVID year was a little bit of a write-off. That was just, I mean, some people might have wanted to escape to the Arctic, but it wasn't
Like
necessarily
COVID can't survive
year.
there. Let's go there.
Yeah, there we go. Right. So, but not to go into the whole COVID thing, but at the end of the day, a travel brand through COVID was a wild time. And the fact that we brought their traffic up by over 100% on organic, we merged a lot of their properties together, which was a huge project. And we helped expand their ad program to actually, it is an e-commerce program. You can technically go on there right now and spend $30,000 on a trip to Greenland. But for the most part, you're going to research, you're going to ask for a guide, you're going to want to get on a call, you're going to determine if the trip is right for you. And it might take you 6 months to actually decide, or a year or 2 years to decide to pull the trigger on such a cool journey. So with that being said, we built an ad program for them where we really built up their entire Salesforce milestoning, integrated Salesforce with their ad platforms. And our results were phenomenal. We scaled their spend, we scaled their return 5x, and they were very happy with what we're doing for several years. And it was a big success.
A little bit more to play with in a restaurant, I imagine. That's got thin
Yes. Margins. Yeah, exactly. We got to build really cool content on polar bears and photography and build all these audience funnels. It was actually a very fun brand to work with.
If you're looking at the video version, you can see we're on the Quark Expeditions website here, and you can see some really cool footage from this video. It's pretty remarkable.
I haven't gone to the Arctic yet.
I was going to say, have you gone on one of these trips yet?
My partner and I talked about it. We're like, we have a lot of travel goals. I'm a big traveler, and this is probably one I'll do in the next 10 years, not next few years.
There was another one, Ben, Transformer Table. What kind of work did you do with them?
This has been, they're a client of ours still, and I'm actually flying to Montreal to see them next week. Excited to see Alex and the crew if they listen to this. They're a great brand. They are an ambitious brand. We've been working with them for about 2 years now. What's really exciting about them is they found a very niche product. They were on Dragon's Den. This is them right there. Yeah. And they are marketers at heart. Their founders are they've been around for several years. This brand has been growing. I think they started in 2013 or 14. But you could tell
they're good because this is not a typical, furniture site, right?
Exactly. They sell tables. They are exciting. They build content. They have a whole YouTube studio in their office in Montreal. It's all awesome. They are such a fun brand to work with. So they had this upward trajectory where they were scaling as a brand, but what they could never crack was the SEO side of things. And as a brand who moves quickly and who does massive site-wide changes to the site, that is not a recipe for SEO success. Stability, strategic, keyword targeting, brand building through links, through PR, all these different things. So we had to do a major infrastructure change to their entire website to get them technically up to date. We had to shift how they focused and how they treated their site because they expanded to 15 new countries. And when we did that, they had to basically target individual geos with SEO, right? So how Google works from an international SEO perspective is like google.ca is a different algorithm than google.com. So if you launch in 2 countries, you're actually trying to solve 2 different problems and you're serving 2 different audiences. And Google knows that. So you have to have a plan for how you're going to internationalize. So we help them internationalize. We help them migrate some of their brands. Their traffic has gone up exponentially. It's at least doubled as well as their revenue. I think they 3x'd in revenue last year, which was really significant for them. And they have even grander goals this year, which I'll be talking with them next week. So yeah, just some exciting things. Their product, that was something that was really cool. Is their product is essentially an expandable table as well as other furniture, but their flagship product is the expandable table. They do like modular couches and seating and benches and all that kind of stuff, but the table is where they started. And we've actually ranked them in the States for expandable dining table, first overall. And we've beat brands like Wayfair, IKEA, Costco, major brands. And we did that through leaning into very niche, very helpful, creative content, as well as an authority strategy that built trust into their product pages. So, there was always this worry of like, will we ever get past 5th position when you're up against IKEA, Wayfair, all these big
Very
brands?
tough, yeah.
It's very tough, and it took us a year, but the traffic on those keywords are huge. And what they specialize in as a brand and what they're really good at is conversion rates and retargeting. So with our ability to drive that positional ranking and that strategy, their paid media program and their SEO program have really flourished together.
Well, you can see on the site here, it's really cool. For me, it visually locks me in, because you can see obviously the Super Bowl is coming up when we're talking right now, and you can see they have some. Enter your email for a chance to win 2 tickets for the big game and 1 transformer table. So. Yeah. They're going all in on their marketing here.
Exactly.
So if you're listening to this, maybe the next Super Bowl will be in, because right now it's going to be in like a week or so. But really interesting. Ben, first of all, thanks for sharing your journey and lessons. I have one last question for you, but I just do want to encourage people to check out your website, NAV43. .com to learn more. My last question is just on resources, some of your favorites. It could be books, it could be mentors of yours that you've learned from. Who are some of your favorite resources?
Good question. I mentioned earlier, I really believe in the power of community. And I think some of my strongest ways that I've grown over the past few years has been through my LinkedIn network and some of the Slack groups I'm a part of. Leading up to that, I joined lots of mastermind groups, but you really you get out what you put in. And I don't know, it's a little bit of a cop-out, but I would say some of the strongest things you could do is find like-minded marketers in your space who are doing what you're doing and grow those relationships, understanding that you're not going to be the best at everything. Like I have people who are amazing at email marketing and I give them tips about SEO and they tell me how when they're building new lead funnels out, because that's their specialty. And similarly for technical SEO, someone who's a lot more than myself and understands how all these technical evolutions are happening either within NAV43 or within my community. So I definitely think it's a great idea to find a mentor. I think it's a great idea to find your community and make sure you're investing in them. I go on LinkedIn, I answer questions people ask me. I go on these Slack groups and I engage from a personal and business level. If you're going to be a business owner as an agency owner, you kind of have to be both feet in. And some people can do it. They can be solopreneurs and have their lives completely disconnected from their business. Don't get me wrong, that's definitely a possibility. But for me, I really foster those relationships. So, and I don't check in once a month, right? Like I have these Slack groups open. I go on my LinkedIn daily or every other day or weekly at least, and I engage. So those are some of my favorite things
You
that
have
I
a
do
favorite
ongoing.
Slack group?
I do love. There's 2. There's one I'm in Toronto. It's just called. Actually, I think it's a private group if I'm being honest. So it's
Okay.
just called Digital Marketing Toronto.
Okay.
And there's another one. There's another one called Rhodium Weekend, which is a phenomenal business group where I have a lot more wider spread opinions online. Those are two of my favorites. And then
Is Chris Yates? Chris Yates
Yes.
started it.
Chris Yates, yeah.
Is he? I don't know if he's still involved.
Yeah, he still runs it. He
cool.
actually just rebranded it. I've had the pleasure of meeting Chris and really enjoy him. He's very smart and
Yeah,
amazing
Chris is
person to
awesome.
know.
So definitely check out Rhodium for people out there.
Sure.
Ben, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone, check out more episodes of the podcast. Check out nav43.com, and we'll see everyone next time. Thanks, Ben.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.